throughout the course of my career, I found myself in a lot of C-suites. Found myself in a lot of offices of business owners and or in boardrooms. And typically, the decision makers would, throughout the course of the conversation, when you're trying to make the sale, they'd tell you about what kind of culture they envisioned their organization having. And that they would, and sometimes it was on the mission statements on the wall or the vision statement that you'd see while you're sitting in the corporate lobby waiting to go in and talk to them. And what was unique about our industry is that then we get to the opportunity to go and speak with every different level of the organization, right? So after you get the yes from the chief decision maker, then now you're working through human resources, you're working with frontline managers, all the way down to frontline employees. And it gave me a unique perspective on the culture that the business owner, the chief decision maker, was espousing in that meeting. Is that really in place when you get to the frontline employee? Sometimes they were the same. Sometimes there was a real big disconnect. And also, when you have the same client, let's say for 5-10 years, you get to see how that culture impacts the performance of that organization.
Welcome to the RockstarsRocking podcast, powered by Voluntary Disruption, a show dedicated to people who are crushing their business and life goals. These are bite-sized conversations with leading rock stars in their respective industry who are pumped to share their story to help drive you to the next level. So, are you ready to rock? Speaking of rock stars, here's your host, Eric Silverman.
Hey, rock stars, welcome back to another episode of RockstarsRocking, where you know it, I say it each and every episode. I only have the best, the finest, the most impressive rock stars rocking it out in their daily life, their business life, hitting their goals, crushing whatever it is that is on their mind. And guess what, folks? Today is no different. This week is absolutely no different. It's an honor. It's a privilege. Any superlative you can imagine, insert right there. I have my good longtime friend and former colleague, actually, in the benefits world, Dan Bredeson. Dan, what's up, buddy?
That was quite an intro. You were. I was looking over my shoulder. I'm like, well, who's he got here? Is it really me? So thank you.
Man,
Thank you for the superlatives.
Just so folks know, and we'll talk about your background a little bit, but Dan is a new Amazon best-selling author of the incredible book. I'm going to hold it up on the screen for those watching on YouTube. If you're just listening in your car, lazy bone. No, I'm just kidding. Appreciate you listening.
They're out there hustling.
Exactly. Don't hang up. This is Seeds of Culture, is his new best-selling book, Seeds of Culture, by Dan Bredeson. The subtitle is Improve Organizational Performance by Growing a Culture of Commitment. Dan, we're going to talk a lot about the book. I'm super pumped. I've made a bunch of notes, and I can't wait for people to learn about it if they don't already know. But there would be no book, correct me if I'm wrong, there'd be no book had you not had the experiences that you've had over your long career. You've been in the insurance employee benefits world even longer than me. Is it not the experience and background you had in the benefits world that created the initial seed? See what I did there? For getting this book going?
You are exactly right. So I have 21 years of experience in the employee benefits, specifically the voluntary benefit space. And as you know, and as probably a lot of your audience knows, you're running into a lot of different organizations. So you're seeing a lot of different cultures. What's really unique about the industry that I was in, that a lot of your listeners are in, is we have this unique opportunity. When you're calling on a client, you're calling on a prospect, you're trying to get to the highest level decision maker, right? To get the yes or the no out of them. And so throughout the course of my career, I found myself in a lot of C-suites. I found myself in a lot of offices of business owners and or in boardrooms. And typically the decision makers would, throughout the course of the conversation, when you're trying to make the sale, they'd tell you about what kind of culture they envisioned their organization having. And that they would, and sometimes it was on the mission statements on the wall or the vision statement that you'd see while you're sitting in the corporate lobby waiting to go in and talk to them. And what was unique about our industry is that then we get to the opportunity to go and speak with every different level of the organization, right? So after you get the yes from the chief decision maker, then now you're working through human resources, you're working with frontline managers, all the way down to frontline employees. And it gave me a unique perspective on the culture that the business owner, the chief decision maker, was espousing in that meeting. Is that really in place when you get to the frontline employee? Sometimes they were the same, sometimes there was a real big disconnect. And also, when you have the same client, let's say for 5-10 years, you get to see how that culture impacts the performance of that organization. So yeah, I don't have a PhD in organizational change or organizational development or something like that. What I have is about 20 years of interacting with every different level of hundreds of different organizations and thousands of employees. When you're sitting down and talking to them about their VB, that it really sparked in me a curiosity to investigate that, research that deeper. I did end up going to grad school and given the opportunity to kind of match up academia with what I saw in the field in the insurance industry all those years. And then I took the opportunity to look at that through the lens of my upbringing on a small farm to come up with this kind of new paradigm for how leaders and pretty much anyone who works in an organization can think about the culture of their organization. So a long-winded answer to a short question, but yeah, that's how a guy in the insurance industry ended up writing a book about organizational culture.
Well, look, culture is a short word that has, to me, a lot of different meanings and a lot of ways to perceive it.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the benefits world 24 years, and the fact of the matter is there are a lot of employers out there that will, if you ask them, they'll tell you how great their culture is. But if you survey and ask the employees, it's going to be a stark difference compared to what the employer and or the HR professional said.
Right.
We know that's pretty obvious. There's a meme that goes around, it's still going around. In fact, I just saw it again the other day on social media, Instagram, where it's, everybody's busy, everybody's upset, culture isn't perfect, great. And all it does is pan to a picture of 15 pizzas laid out in the break room.
Yes, right? I've seen that meme before too. Like,
it's like, culture's bad, no problem, have some pizza.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Let's get some Little Caesars in here. That'll make everything better.
Exactly. It's crazy bread.
Isn't it interesting that, when you've sat down with probably thousands of employees in the course of your career, and what I always found fascinating is I was there to talk to them about insurance and the different benefit options that were available to them. They were seemingly there to talk about the company. So we're asking all the height, weight, age, how much you make, all the questions that you're not supposed to ask at a cocktail party, and including politics, but that often came up. But it was just amazing, the stuff that people would divulge when you're sitting down and talking to them, because you were there to talk to them about something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how often in your experience did you sit down to talk to someone about their benefits and they tell you, well, I'm getting ready to quit this job and go take another one anyways?
Oh, man. Anybody who's in our business, if you've ever met with employees in a face-to-face fashion over the years, I guarantee that's happened to you, no different than it's happened to me and Dan.
Yeah. But I would take it a step further, but really, why? They'd often tell me why they were leaving or why they liked working, or probably the flip side of that coin is, how often did you sit down and talk to an employee, and maybe it was a client that you had for 7-8 years, and you'd see them, once a year for, almost building that relationship with them. And you'd start to learn why people stick and stay at a job and why they like it. And you'd also start to learn why people are looking to get out the door. And then moving into a sales leadership role and hiring agents and recruiting them and things. One of my favorite questions to ask during the interview process was just simply scan a resume and ask, hey, out of all of these jobs that you have listed on your resume here, which one was your favorite and why? And so I just started collecting all of the whys over the year, why people like jobs that they like, why they leave jobs that they hate, and everything in between.
Well, look, I mean, I've read a bunch of books over the years on various forms of culture and definitions of it from the author's perspective. Where I think yours is a little bit different is, and I'm probably wrong in this case because I don't remember every author that's ever written a book on culture, But I like how you have that academia approach, like you talked about earlier. You bring in not only the hands-on, getting your hands dirty, elbow grease experience of 20 plus years in the benefits world and leading thousands of professionals like I have, but you also bring to it a different vibe on the educational side. Real quick, for anybody that's listening, if you're already hooked like you should be, go to Dan's website to grab the book if you haven't already checked it out. Bredeson is spelled Bredeson. Will certainly be in the show notes if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or watching on YouTube or whatever. But it's danbredeson.com, danbredeson.com, Bredeson. And you, I mean, it's literally available anywhere truly books are sold. Heck, you have kids. Did your kids love when they found out Dad's book they could go to probably Target or Barnes and Noble or Books A Million? Amazon's
Yeah.
great, don't get me wrong, but come on, that's boring compared to Target.
Right. It was my daughter's 9, and nothing I've ever done in her lifetime has impressed her more than when I pulled it up on Target.com and she could see that her dad's book was available at Target, her favorite store. So
how cool is that?
Yeah, anywhere that you can buy books, you can go to find it. So
that's awesome. Well, listen, the book, I like how you broke it down. It's broken down in basically 4 I don't even want to call them chapters, kind of parts, 4 segments of the book, right? Can you maybe give us a little Reader's Digest version of each part in some capacity? So like starting obviously with part 1, talk about the first part of the first segment of the book.
Sure. It's the kind of the theme that runs throughout the book was, the aha moment that I had that led me to sit down and write. Where there's a couple of parts to it. I did go back to grad school. That is something that I'd always wanted to do, and I ended up going to George Washington University. Got my master's degree in organizational leadership and learning after spending a lot of time in the field. And there was an independent research and study kind of course that I could take one semester. And I'd always been interested in the intersection between leadership, culture, and an organization's performance. Right. If an organization is not performing, it's pretty standard script. Like, oh, this organization's failing. Well, the leader sucks. The culture must suck. The culture sucks. We got to bring in a new leader. Like, there's always this intersection. But where's the correlation and where's the causation? Is that the culture impacting the leader impacting the culture? Is it, and both of them working together to impact the performance? So I took the opportunity in grad school. I'm like, well, how about I do this independent research semester? I'll do some research on this subject that I've been interested in for years. And then like the 30-page paper that I spit out at the end of that semester, a professor gets a bird's eye view on it. And he said, well, yeah, I think you could actually expand this out into a book. So, that's how a 30-page paper turned into 230, 40 pages of book.
We give you a head start.
Give me a head start. And also like that sort of the getting a master's degree gave me the skill set and the muscles to do research on a particular subject, as opposed to just, some guy talking, out of nowhere. So it was actually going, and I wanted to see like how has this been studied and what have people found on this particular subject. So there was that piece of it, and I've always been fascinated about it. But a lot of going to my kind of real world experience, the most successful leaders that I talked to throughout all those years and all those different companies that I worked with, they reminded me of someone. They reminded me of my dad. And I grew up on a small dairy farm in Wisconsin, and the good leaders, they had the patience of a farmer. They nurtured the growth of culture. They didn't try to build it. So the basic premise of the book is that culture is an organic process. Culture is grown, it's not built. Don't go out there and think like a carpenter, like you're going to put this together with force and speed and skill or power. It's like it's an organic process. So in like any organic process, you got to start with the right seeds. And so the first part of the book kind of goes over the lay of the land. So it talks about a good definition, like a working definition of culture. It's going through why culture matters, and then how culture ultimately can impact performance. So the book was actually going to come out about 6 months earlier than expected. But as I was finishing it up and writing it, that's when the Great Resignation was like on everybody's mind. You couldn't, open up LinkedIn without seeing 14 different articles written on it. Like everybody was talking about Wall Street Journal, NPR, your loud and opinionated uncle. Everyone had an opinion on the Great Resignation. I'm like, well, I can't really write a book and release it and not address the Great Resignation. So then it took me another couple months to kind of, figure out how culture had impacted the Great Resignation. So that's actually most of chapter 2. Kind of gives a breakdown of where culture is. So that's the first part of it. And then I go into the traits of successful culture farmers. So,
well, hold on 1 second. Before we get
sure.
into part 2, I have a question for you. So you mentioned in part 1, you talked about leadership. I just, a random question that comes to mind. I'm curious your opinion after leading so many hundreds, probably thousands of people like myself back in the carrier days. Do you believe that the best top performing sales professionals, performers, do you believe they typically make or always make the best leaders, managers, mentors, whatever term that wants to be used? Because oftentimes, as you've seen, and I've seen it, and heck, I was part of it, the culture that I came from, and I'll follow my own sword. Don't cry for me, anybody, but I'll follow my own sword. I would oftentimes take the best salespeople, the top performing sales folks, and just congratulations, welcome to the management team. You're a leader, you're a mentor. Now go work, right? I'm basically boiling it down to something simple, but for lack of a better way to explain it, that was how I was taught. That's how I got into leadership. I feel fortunate that I think it worked out well enough for me, but I've seen it not work out well for probably more people than not. So what's your opinion on that? Because that will have an incredible impact on culture when that happens.
Yeah. So it's the old story is does the best salesperson make the best sales leader? And from my experience and what I've seen is they can, but it's not a guarantee. It's no more than it is a guarantee that if someone's a bad salesperson, are they going to be a bad sales leader? No, they could end up being a tremendous sales leader. They might not be, when I say a bad salesperson, it's all relative. I mean, if they're still making a living at it, they just might not be, the world's top performer. And, for anyone listening, they probably run into that too, is maybe they've even been the one who's been a top producer who's like, oh, this is what I used to say. Have a top producer, talk to them about moving into a leadership role. And I would just say, hey, just go out there and just keep killing it the way that you've always been killing it. Just drag someone along with you. Just do what you've always been doing. Just show someone else how to do it. Every day in the field with an agent by your side kind of thing. And that didn't always work out. It didn't always fail, but I've had plenty of people come back to me and say, hey, can you demote me? I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to babysit. I don't want to, just let me go back and produce. I'm like, fine. That's your sweet spot. That's where your happiness is. So it is going to impact the culture, because if you got a top producer and now they're dragging someone around, and that maybe it feels like they've got an anchor that they're dragging around with them, it's probably going to impact their own personal production. Now they're unhappy about that. If they're not happy in their role and they're not really feeling it, then that's definitely going to impact how they do things in their organization, which is the very simplistic definition of culture that we use as a working definition in the book is, how we do things around here. I think it's broad enough, but I think it encompasses what really culture is. If you think about, what is the culture of an organization? It's how we do things around here. And those things are everything. It's how we communicate. It's how we hire. It's how we fire. It's how we train. It's how we dress. It's all of those things. And it's interesting that, a new hire orientation can tell you what to do, but it's not until you spend some time in the organization that you're going to see how we do things around here, because it's going to be the culture that's giving you the clues as to, hey, this is how we do things around here. That's going to make the definition of what the culture is. So if you've got an unhappy sales leader who wishes he or she was back in, personal production, then that's going to impact how things are done in that organization.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm a big anybody listening probably knows I'm a big baseball guy or Baltimore Orioles fan, but I like the sport in general. And major national news, if you're a baseball person, this year, 2023, when we're recording this during the season, was the Chicago White Sox were supposed to be really good this year, and they weren't. And they ended up trading a bunch of their top stars, and the players themselves were very good. And they traded them, and those stars went to the new team and publicly, and I'm not keen on this, but they did publicly say how terrible the culture was in the Chicago White Sox organization. And it made national news, and it talked about how the culture and the management and the GM and the president of operations and the manager of the baseball team and the coaches, it was just a really crazy environment, to say the least. And there was no real leadership, nobody setting the tone and creating a pace of momentum. And go figure, the team didn't do so well. So the players were outwardly talking about how they appreciated their new team because already in the first week they've seen so much structure and so much discipline and so much such a different culture change. So the reason I bring this up,
well, I gotta put a pin in that for just a second. I'll come back to it. Is I got a baseball story relating to culture too. That's a good one. So, but
well, I want people to understand, listening, that I assume you do, is it's not just sales, it's not just business. I mean, baseball is a business, but it's really anything and everything to do with the environment in which you have people that are working together, trying to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the Rangers are up 2-0 in their series against the Astros, right? I think the Rangers won again last.
Yeah, 7 straight.
Yeah. So here's an interesting culture in terms of how we do things around here. And if you're wondering what the things are, it's everything. So my son loves baseball, and so my wife she grew up in San Diego, and her dad was a San Diego Padres season ticket holder. So she would always go to spring training with him as well. So kind of a bucket list thing. When our son got old enough, he turns out that he loves baseball. So my wife took our son out to spring training, and kind of mostly to catch a lot of Padres games, but also to see whoever else was out there in the Peoria, Arizona area. And it was fascinating that they spent time around the White Sox organization, because my son's pitching coach in the offseason is coached my son in the offseason, but he's in the White Sox organization, and they were fine and well. But there was 2 organizations that they came back from spring training with very different stories about how they were treated as fans, even at spring training. The first one is the Rangers. The Rangers were awesome. My son's left-handed, so he had his glove out there, and lefties always get attention, right? So they're like, every time he'd go up and see the pitchers and the bullpen guys, they'd always be like, "Hey, lefty, hey, come on, lefty." So that made him feel special and cool. And all the lefty pitchers were like, "Make sure they let you hit as long as possible. I miss hitting." So keep hitting as long as you can. So it was just, he got so many signatures from the Rangers players. It was just an amazing experience. And then like 2 days later, they're mostly at the Padres facility. Could not have been more different. There's like a fence that you couldn't even see through, that separated the fans from the players, because the Padres were supposed to be amazing this year as well, right? They think about the payroll, think about the talent that they have on their team, right?
Right.
The Padres, think about the talent that they had on their team, and they were supposed to be amazing, and they were acting like they were the Yankees, or sorry to bring that up, but they were acting like they had all these pennants and World Series championships in spring training, and just treated their fans like crap. It's just so. My son was, maybe there was a hint that he would be a bit of a Padres fan, inherited it from his mom. Not a chance now. And it's just fascinating how, you almost could have pegged it way back in spring training, just the way that they did everything. The way that you do anything is the way that you do everything. So it's good to see that the Rangers are still in it. And my son was happy. I think he gave me a high five when the Padres were eliminated, because he's like, they were mean to me at spring training.
Look, you're spot on. And don't forget too, when the Padres got eliminated and every other team gets eliminated, the team social media person immediately puts on Facebook and social media and Instagram, "Thank you, fans. You're the best fans in baseball."
Right.
Sarcasm there. Like the reality is, it's just the patented, here's what you have to say and here's what you have to do. But the organization, the players, the coaches are not, they're not performing to the fans' expectation, not just on the field, but off the field as well. Anyway, I could talk baseball forever, but I just thought it was unique because I do want people to remember it's not just sales and marketing and HR. The culture is a loose definition of everything.
Mhm.
So part two, you start to get into things like think like a farmer, not a carpenter, and you start talking about being authentic and having credibility and integrity. Can you kind of discuss some of these traits in a little bit more detail and where the genesis of part two came from?
Sure. So going to, the leadership culture performance, kind of the intersection and the nexus of that, and sticking with the theme of like, this is an organic process. So leaders are referred to as culture farmers. Like they're synonymous in the books. And you really got to have the mindset of a farmer. And where that's divergent from the mindset of a carpenter is kind of in three ways that I really look to is farming and carpentry. My dad was good at both, right? And they have some things in common. You can take some raw materials and then eventually turn it into some type of product. But where they're divergent from a mindset perspective is in, speed, force, and control. Carpenters can quickly, forcefully control the outcome that they're going to get. They can screw wood together. Guys working in construction. I mean, the Empire State Building was erected like 13 months. Like that's how long it took to build it. Like you can build things pretty quickly, but culture, if it's going to stick and stay, is not done quickly. You need to have the patience of a farmer. It's not going to be turned around overnight. And anyone who's telling you that they can quickly shift the entire culture of an organization, I'm not going to say they're lying to you. I'm just saying that it's just not going to happen that fast. So,
Dan, you're forgetting about Little Caesars, buddy.
right, I can just bring in some Little Caesars, or here's another thing is I have some friends that one in particular that I'm thinking of, and at her place of employment, she was asked to be part of he was asked to, thinking of somebody else, he was asked to be part of like the culture committee in his organization, which was a committee that was put together in a very top-down fashion to try to figure out how they were going to build the culture within the organization. And it in some ways, it comes top-down, meaning that the leader needs to do the right things, but that leader needs to be planting the right seeds that are going to grow up. You can't force culture into an organization. It has to grow on its own by planting the right seeds is what I'm getting at. And so, yeah, you can't do it by bringing out the Little Caesars, or, people used to think that culture was like beanbag chairs and craft beer on tap in the break room, right?
Sleeping
Then
pods.
the world goes remote, and then what is it, right?
Right.
It's there's more to culture than just letting people bring their dogs to work. I mean, yeah, that's one thing, but it's got to be something deeper than that, and it can't be forced into the organization. So that's what I'm saying is that carpenters can control their results. They can do it fairly quickly. And culture farmers, I try to get folks this idea of like let go of control. Stop thinking you can control people. You can influence people. You can influence the results if you've planted these right seeds of culture and you've cultivated them properly. But nothing's going to happen quickly. But if you can get those roots, the roots of that culture sunk into the ground, it's going to be able to withstand any storm that comes along, right?
Sure.
Even paying people more doesn't improve culture. Like MIT did a study that came out in 2021. It's in the book. It's referenced in there, that they did a study of like their culture champions. I think it was the 2020 culture champions. So if you Google MIT Sloan School of Management 2020 culture champions, they were specifically going through organizations who are winning financially and winning in performance and also winning in culture. And they had surveyed like thousands of responses, everything from social media to survey responses of all these different organizations. And they found that compensation was like number 16 on the list of things that make people happy where they work. And culture was 10 times more important than compensation when it came to determining whether or not a person was happy with where they work. And that's startling numbers. Like you don't have to just pay people more. I mean, if you're paying them a fair wage, it's up to market, and if they got good benefits and things like that, they're going to be looking for other things. They're going to be looking for the culture and do they like where they're working. So that in the second part of the book, I talk about the mindset of having the mindset of a farmer, not a carpenter, and then going through some attributes of successful culture farmers that I've seen. The folks who are doing a really good job at nurturing and growing the type of culture that stands the test of time. You know, a lot of those leaders that I dealt with throughout the years, you know, of these clients that I had for 10 or 15 years that were always really performing, just a lot of the attributes that they had, things like an affinity for people. You know, you would think that liking people would be a prerequisite for leading people, but that's not always the case. I don't know if you've ever had a sales leader who you've actually asked, like, does this person even really like people? Like, what, you know, or do they just merely tolerate my presence?
Right.
So having an affinity for people is one. Another attribute is making culture a priority and talking about it in the same way that you would talk about sales, marketing, production, customer service, whatever the case might be. Third attribute would be having enough energy. And by energy, I mean physical and emotional energy in order to do the work. There's the physical energy required to be a culture farmer, but also the emotional energy to do it, and the mental energy. Kind of back to an earlier question, sometimes top sales performers might not be the top sales leaders because they wouldn't expend the mental energy to study leadership or study leadership principles and try to, they're good at the sales game, but if I've noticed that if they didn't study the leadership game, right, as much as they had studied the sales game, they weren't going to be a great sales leader. Another attribute is authenticity. You know, folks are looking to follow something that's real. We have so many fake things in our world, from, you know, fake news to fake bots to just, there's so much stuff out there that's not real, that a strong, committed culture is going to come when the leader is an authentic person that individuals are going to want to follow. And then the last two are credibility and integrity. So the way I break that down is that credibility is the reason that people will start listening to you. Integrity is the reason that people will continue listening to you.
Sure.
So there's a kind of the 6 attributes of culture farmers.
Well, yeah. So my I mean, I can go on and all of them, but I really resonate well these days with authenticity and integrity. I don't know that I would have said that 15 years ago when I was leading a big workforce. I'm just being honest, right? And I've talked about myself and my past on my podcast before with other guests. I'm not going to do that today, but I'm very cognizant of the type of leader that I was, what I liked about it, and much that I did not like. So I resonate these days more with the parts you're talking about when it comes to the authenticity, the integrity. I've always had the right energy. I've always been able to prioritize what I believe I needed at that time. But those hit hard for me. So I'm glad you went through those. You know, when you get to part 3 and you're talking about the seeds of culture in general, I want you to expound upon a lot of it if you can, but I'm really excited to hear you kind of express upon folks listening when you talk about ethics, but moreover psychological safety. I think that in the workplace or not the workplace, but the world that we live in now, mental health is a big deal. My wife is a licensed clinical social worker. She's a psychotherapist, and you know, sure, she has patients that come to her and share all their deepest, darkest secrets about their past. But a lot of times she's spending time helping, being the sounding board for people talking about their work and their culture, right, and how they can't say this or they can't say that. So, you know, I'll shut up and let you expound on it, but that one means a lot to me as well.
Yeah. And this is the psychological safety, the first time that and this is a very tangible, it wouldn't be in there if I hadn't gone to grad school, because I was not familiar with that term before going to grad school. And initially, when I was first introduced to that term, I don't know if I had maybe kind of a negative connotation to it. Psychological safety, it sounds like safe space stuff and all. It sounds like I wasn't thinking about it properly. But then when I actually learned about what it means, I'm like, oh yeah, we do like that. You kind of backing up for 1 second, like, how did I determine what made the short list of the seeds of culture? Is I use what I call the absence test, which is that I had a whole list of different things that I was like, yeah, I think that's an important seed of culture. This is an important seed of culture. That other thing, the way that I broke it down to get to the seeds that I came up with was, I asked this question: in the absence of blank, what kind of culture are you going to have? So in the absence of effective communication, will you have a good culture? In the absence of ethics, in the absence of, fill in the blank. And so, what I came up with, the 7 seeds that I came up with, they passed the absence test, right? So in the absence of psychological safety, what type of culture are you going to get? Well, let's first go ahead and define psychological safety. That is a condition that exists within an organization where people feel like their voice can be heard, their opinions can be expressed, and they're not going to be shot down. They're not going to suffer negative ramifications for stating their opinions and communicating their thoughts, right? It's actually been around since the 60s, but it's really in the 90s that Amy Edmondson, I believe, getting her name correctly, she's at Harvard, and she's done a lot of writing on this subject around psychological safety. We all like it. We may not have known the term was called psychological safety, but we all like it. We all appreciate it. And what I mean by that is, if you're in a meeting, if you're in a boardroom and you're going around and you're discussing a particular topic and you state your opinion on it, or you throw an idea out there, right? And someone in the room shoots it down. So, that's a stupid idea. Why would we ever do that? That's not going to work. That's not a psychologically safe environment, right?
Oh.
That's
demoralizing.
And then also the reason why it's important for culture is, what's the likelihood that you're going to speak up at the next meeting?
Right.
Probably not. Or if maybe the person doesn't shoot you down right to your face, but you bring something to the table in a meeting or in an email or however you do it, you bring something to the attention of the entire group, and someone in the group uses it and goes behind your back to, screw you over some way, right? Not a psychologically safe environment. And what it does in those situations is that it shuts down ideas. It shuts down experimentation. Psychological safety is important for experimentation within a culture, because if you are afraid, let me put it this way: when you experiment or try something new, maybe it's a new sales approach, maybe it's a new way to reach out for client retention, maybe it's a new way to do X, Y, or Z. Anytime that you try something new, there's a chance that you're going to screw it up and it's not going to work and you're going to fail anytime you try something new. If you try something new and you fail, and your entire organization or even a piece of your organization gets on you about it, are you ever going to try anything new again? No. You're like, I'm not going to try something new. I'm not going to take the risk of trying this new process out, because what if it fails and I'm going to be made fun of? I'm going to be humiliated. Let me just go back and try to solve this same old problem in the same old way. Versus in a psychologically safe environment, there is this freedom to experiment. There's a freedom to try things out. And if it doesn't work, which quite often doesn't happen, no one gets on you about it, right? They just help you come with a different path forward. But it just, the world is expanding at an exponential rate. So new ideas are going to be necessary. I mean, just think about the insurance industry, right? Just think about, when you and I started in 97, you started in 99. Like, think about the difference in tech in this industry then versus now, and where is it going to go? And
I was really good at operating a fax machine, I'll tell you that.
Oh, facts, right? I remember the first batch of apps that I sent down. They sent down to the headquarters. They got mailed back to me. Like I'm like, where's my commission payment? I need to
6
get
weeks
paid.
after the effective date.
Right. And then I came back into the office and like I had one of those mail slots. And it was just filled like with applications. And I'm like, oh my God. So, but if you're an organization or if you're running a sales team and if someone tries something new and you shoot them down, well, they're not going to try anything new again.
Right.
And it's going to be the new stuff that's going to get you to that new client, to that, or holding on to the person that you have. So psychological safety is it's I kind of use the story in the book. I would say even tough guys like psychological safety. Even the folks who are like, I'm a tough guy, I don't do all this psychological safety stuff. What's that about? Even Mr. Tough Guy likes psychological safety, because Mr. Tougher Guy is always going to run into, or Mr. Tough Guy is always going to run into a tougher guy, right?
Sure.
No matter how tough you think you are, guess who's tougher? The marketplace. Right. The marketplace is always going to be the tougher guy. You could be a tough guy CEO. You know who's a tougher guy? Your board of directors. Right. So it's having an organization, having a culture where people's ability to experiment, try new things without getting shot down when they fail, that's going to be, paramount to success in the years to come. So I had to include it as a seed of culture because it can't be absent.
No, and I'm glad you did, and I'm glad you went through it because, candidly, even though my wife is in the psychology world, I'd never heard the term psychological safety ever until I saw it in your book, and that's why I wanted you to chat about it. Because, like you said, most people probably aren't familiar, and heck, you learned about it in grad school, for heaven's sake. So, by all means, seeds of culture. It's grad school without the expense. Check that out. There you go.
Right. There you go.
So we'll start to wrap up. I want to talk about part 4, but real quick, again, everybody, if you haven't already checked it out, go to danbredeson.com. Dan, Dan, all one word, Bredeson, Bredeson. The show notes will have the website, danbredeson.com. Seeds of Culture, Amazon bestseller. It's available anywhere you get your books, Target, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Amazon, what have you. You can get it right from his website. I want to dive into my favorite part, though. I think it's it's part 4, but it's actually chapter 19. So chapter 19 starts talking about cultivating performance. And I want you to kind of break down. I don't know, it may be hard to verbalize as much as a picture's worth a million words. You can check it out in the book. But I like the what you're calling the 4CP life cycle. Can you talk about that as we start to finish up the episode?
Sure. So keeping with the theme of, if culture is an organic process and you've got a culture farmer who's a leader and you've planted the right seeds of cultures, what happens once you get a seed in the ground? Well, my dad didn't, on the farm, he didn't just put seeds in the ground and then walk away and ignore them. You have to properly cultivate the seeds if you're going to get performance. So I thought that the book would be incomplete without spending some time on how to cultivate the seeds that you've planted into performance. And it just so happened that there was 4 C's that worked out very nicely, which is starting with the culture. Okay. So you planted the seeds. Culture is, I've defined as how we do things around here. We've already talked about that. So culture is how we do things around here. Culture is going to determine the climate. A lot of times folks will conflate the two and say, or think that they're equal, like culture and climate, they're the same thing. They're actually a little bit different. There's the culture of how we do things around here. And then climate is how we feel about the culture, right? It's that vibe in the office. It's that feeling. It's, when someone's at a backyard barbecue, they're talking about the climate, right? So the way that things are done in that organization, the how we do things is going to determine how we feel about how we do those things, right? So when people are complaining about where they work, that's the climate. And it's because something must be happening that they don't like. So culture, how we do things around here. Climate is how we feel about the culture. And those are both kind of group level constructs, meaning it's how we do things around here. It's how we feel about the culture around here. The third kind of C, as you're working around in the life cycle is commitment. And this is kind of the big part of the book, is that true performance is in long-lasting performance is going to come from a bunch of individuals making an individual commitment to the organization. And if enough folks make that individual commitment to the organization, they're going to become a community. And when folks are working as part of a community, their performance is going to skyrocket. So how we do things around here, culture, how we feel about the culture is the climate. And then based upon that climate, I'm going to make the individual decision. It's not a group level construct anymore. I'm going to make the individual decision of, I like this climate around here. This is a place I can see myself sticking and staying. This is a place that I can see myself committing to. I want to help make this place win, because I want to continue to be a part of this culture and this climate. You get enough people together doing that, it's going to lead to a community. And then in a community, people will have, there's a thing called organizational citizenship behaviors, right? So another grad school thing, so just save you some money. So there's OCB, organizational citizenship behaviors, and you can have, there's two kinds of those too. There's organizational citizenship behaviors that are for the individual and for the organization. So an OCB for an individual would be, you and I work together, right? And we're both working on a project, but you call in sick, I step up and I take care of it for you because I'm helping out you out individual to individual. Well, if you're working in an environment or working in a company where there's that kind of culture where we step up for one another on an individual basis, performance is going to go up. An OCB for the organization would be, I know that there's a big project that even another team's working on. I'll come in on the weekend to help them out because I'm going to go help out the larger organization. So both of those citizenship behaviors as part of a community are going to help the performance of the organization. So yeah, you're right. It makes more sense when you see it in the diagram, but those are like the 4 C's that come together to influence performance. It's planting those seeds, which are how we do things around here. It gets people to feel a specific way about the way we do things. It's called the climate. That's going to determine whether or not they make an individual commitment to the organization. You get enough of those individual commitments together, that forms a community. When you get a community of people working together, man, watch out. Like that's where it's at.
Watch out. That's where it's at. I love it. And we'll wrap up on that, man. For those that are still around, I appreciate you listening. Check out danbredeson.com. It's not listed on his website, but again, anywhere you can get books, it's going to be there. And I just was curious and I went to Walmart. It's on Walmart's website. In fact, I don't know if it'll still be on sale at the time you're listening, but Walmart has it a few dollars off today as of now. So,
well, the coolest, in addition to my daughter thinking it was very cool that it was on Target, there's a friend of mine from grad school who now lives outside of Amsterdam. And he showed me a snapshot of, or a screenshot of, he bought the book on some Dutch book website. So there was Seeds of Culture around, like it was the Dutch version of Books.
Was it in a different language?
No, it's in English. He bought it in English, but the website around it was all in Dutch. So, yeah, another one I saw it available on a website. Out of Australia, and it caught my eye because it said like the cover price was like some ridiculous amount. I'm like, wait a minute, why is it that much? It was in Australian dollars.
Right, sure.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well,
so anywhere you buy books, even if you're in the Netherlands.
I appreciate you coming on. I'm excited for folks to get their hands on this. We've worked together for years, and in the prior career carrier world, and I'm just excited to see you prosper. You're leading a good team and doing some good work at your current position. And I don't know if you call it a hobby or not, but this is a hell of a fun thing for folks to check out. And, I think, it's not a secret. We're recording this here. It's in the middle of the baseball playoff postseason. It'll probably be out right in a few weeks from now. It'll be November when you're listening to this, everybody. Perfect time for stocking stuffers. Check it out. It's an affordable book. I won't say cheap because it's not cheap. Cheap means bad, in my opinion. It's affordable and well worth it. Check it out. Get yourself a copy. If you have any sales leaders in your life that are close to you, or you want to get them to improve and get your team to improve, maybe you have a team of sales leaders that report to you, grab a copy. It's available on Amazon, both in Kindle and hardcover. And Dan, any parting shots before we let everybody go?
No, this has just been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you having me on, and it's been good to chat and catch up. And the whole idea of this was that I was trying to demystify this buzzword that is culture. So
That's
right. That's all.
Thanks
for having me.
Well, listen, I just show up and ask questions to some friends or new friends that I meet. I don't really do any of the heavy lifting. You had to do the work and write the book, for heaven's sakes. I just show up and ask some dopey questions that I think are pretty relevant. I'm nothing without my team. See what I'm doing there? So for everybody behind the scenes at the Rockstars Rocking podcast, we appreciate them putting this together for me and you coming on, and certainly everybody listening. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the show. And if you can, leave Dan a review on Amazon and leave me a review anywhere you consume podcasts. 5 stars would totally rock. And I won't tell anybody to go have a great day because that's boring. You don't have a great day. You make it a great day. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Rockstars Rocking podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. 5 stars would totally rock. Until next time, Rockstars, keep rocking.